everyone, my name's Ashley Carvalho. I'm the National Youth Representative with St Vincent de Paul Society, which for anyone who doesn't know, St Vincent de Paul Society, or Vinnies, is a lay Catholic organisation striving to live out the gospel values by serving those in need in the community. And so today we're going to be talking about how stories can have a huge impact and can have a huge positive change. The power of storytelling to actually impact local communities and bring about global movements. So I'm going to walk through some examples of young people and the change that they've done in their community, the stories that they've had, the stories they've shared with other people, and what that's meant on a global level. And so stories, they really help us to see our shared humanity. So facts may help to inform, but they don't always paint the whole picture. They don't always allow people to connect on an emotional level or to understand and empathize. And so stories have a huge power and ability to build empathy and bridges. So for example, we're going to go through a few examples of young people and their stories. So firstly, Blessed Frederick Ozanam. So he is the founder of St Vincent de Paul Society. Back in the 1800s, as a 20-year-old university student, he was very engaged in his faith, and he was a part of a debating group at his university in Paris, and he was challenged. He was challenged about how he was actually applying his faith, not just talking about it, not just theorizing, not just talking about the philosophy of it, but actually helping those in the community. And so he and a group of his friends got together and started to talk, well, what can we actually do? And so the first action they took was to provide firewood to a widow in their community. And from there, they just did little steps after little steps. And then within a year, they had over 100 members across the country. And today, over 150 years later, we are present across over 100 countries around the world. And right here in Australia, we have hundreds of young people also contributing to the work of this society. So what started out as a small little thing has now become this global movement. You may also be familiar right here in Australia, some wonderful people, Nick and Lucas, they started Orange Sky, which is a not-for-profit organisation that delivers or provides cleaning services for those experiencing homelessness. So they were volunteering with food banks and different organisations to support those experiencing homelessness, and they found a gap. They found that those people were not having clean clothes, which I think we all take for granted sometimes. And so they bought a van, they decked it out with a washer and a dryer, and they would go and park their van in areas where people in need would be able to sit while their clothes were being washed and have a conversation as well. And so Nick and Lucas, this started out as a small little thing. It's now present across the country. You may see the orange vans around probably in really populated areas, so in cities, and they're also international now. They've just opened up in New Zealand. We also know of people like Greta Thunberg, who just one small action, she was sat outside of her Swedish parliament with a sign about, striking for climate change, a young girl who felt such despair and anxiety about the future of the planet and the climate and what would happen to her and the generations to come. One small action that led to this global movement of all these other young people interested in supporting her story and what she had done. We also know of people like Malala in Pakistan and her incredible voice, her incredible courage in standing up for the injustice of young women not being able to get access to education. And despite being targeted, her bravery is something that the world rallied behind, her health, her well-being, and she now uses her voice to continue to advocate for women's rights and a number of other important areas too. She's on doing podcasts, she's written a book, using her voice to affect real change. So these are just some examples of young people who did, things in their community, not with the intention of it becoming this big global movement, but because their stories had power. They brought about understanding and empowered and inspired people to act and to join. And so I'm going to be encouraging you all now to think about your own communities and what could you be doing in your own communities that you think needs a change. So I want you all to think to yourselves for a moment about what do you see around you in your local area. So perhaps your parish, your school, your sporting community, your university, whatever that may be, what is something that you would want to change in your community? And I know that's a big question. We here at ACOAF, a number of people were talking about things like mental health and the way that people may not have access to mental health, or there's a stigma around talking about that, or there's a lot of young people in parishes but they're scattered and they're not connected. Can we get a youth group together? There was discussion about lots of homelessness in areas around certain schools. What can be done there? So these are just some ideas for you to think about, and I'll just give you a few seconds for you to think to yourself, or just pause if you need to. So yes, now that you've got your thing that you want to change, or you've got a few ideas happening, that's okay too. What we're going to do now is to work through a storytelling framework. So there are going to be 4 questions and they'll be on your screen. And I want you to take a few moments, or as long as you need, to kind of walk through those steps, and those 4 questions will help you to develop a story of your own, or a story that you could work towards developing so that other people in years to come can say, oh yes, I remember that story, I remember that person or that group of people doing that. So our first question of what did you see? So that's stemming from our last one. What did you see in the community? What was the issue? And what did you feel? So why did it matter to you? You're saying that, there's young people and they're not connected. Why does it matter? Why do we want to do something like a youth group? Well, maybe it's because, young people are feeling alone. We want more formation. They want opportunities to connect and learn and be confident in their faith. And then thirdly, what did you do, or what could you do? If this is a story you're already a part of or something you've already started, what was the actual actions you took? And if this is something that you want to do in the future, what could you do? Could you talk to your local parish priest? Could you talk to your principal or a teacher? Or could you talk to your local St. Vincent de Paul Society and hear about what works are already underway to see what need is actually there for you to support? And then ultimately, what change are you hoping to achieve through these actions? So are you hoping to get people together? Are you hoping to help out and provide clothes or provide food to people in your community who need it? What's the ultimate goal that people are going to want to be a part of? So when you combine all those questions together, and if you need to pause and think through all of that, that's where your story is going to start to come together. And so the story that you have is that it doesn't just tell the world what it is, it shows the world what it could be. We heard all those stories of young people doing small things in their community, and it's led to these global movements, these national movements, these big things that they didn't have in mind when they started out, but their stories have made a huge difference today, and so could yours. And so I encourage you all, it's over to you now in your local communities to think about what stories, what legacy you want to leave, and how you want to incorporate others into that. So thank you so much for joining me today. As I said, my name's Ashley. I'm with St. Vincent de Paul Society Australia. If you're interested in getting involved in your local St. Vincent de Paul Society conference or group, please reach out to our website and you can get all the details. Thank you so much.